Welcome back to the Core Conversations podcast, where we're always tackling these big shifts in automotive retail, specifically around data and AI, how technology is transforming the industry. And today we're jumping in deep into one of the most urgent topics for dealers, and that's data ownership. I'm always joined by Mr. Todd Smith, CEO, founder at QoreAI. He breaks this stuff down better than anybody in the industry, and he recently published a really awesome, thought-provoking piece on LinkedIn. If you haven't checked it out, you need to go. It's called The Death of Middleware, Why Automotive Groups Need to Own Their Own Data, Not Rent It. And it's a wake-up call for the industry, I got to tell you. So right now, there's way too many dealerships that are renting their own data. Imagine that, just conceptually. You're renting your own data from vendors. You're paying for access to insights that should be yours by default. The rise of what's happening and how fast AI is moving. This means that the old way of how you've been managing this stuff through middleware and third-party control, it doesn't work anymore, and it shouldn't be that way. So if you don't own your own data, well, you don't control your future, and there's probably never been a more important time for you to do that. So we're going to explore what's changing, why it matters. The companion to this, again, is this LinkedIn article, so you're going to want to go get into that as we get into this episode. Todd, first, number one, I already know you're doing fantastic, so I'm going to get you right into this. Your article, you talk about the death of middleware. I want you to, for the audience, if you don't mind, clarify what middleware is for the dealership world, why it's becoming obsolete.
Yeah, look, middleware is exactly that. It's a system that lives between systems, right? And a lot of times I will say, like, let's look at something like a CDP. That to me is basically a middleware. So I'm taking my data out of my DMS. I'm now plugging it. I'm moving some of my customer data into another system. I'm cleaning that up, or sort of cleaning, whatever. Now I'm attaching that to marketing. So you are continuing the fractionation of your data. Probably not a word, but I'm going to go with it. And the reality is you don't want these middle systems living between your nucleus, your dealership data, and the tools you're trying to do. And this is why, we have this world where we have all this disconnected data in automotive, and all of them are chewing up your data, and you are having to pay to get access to that. And to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I see a different world emerging, mostly driven by AI, but more importantly, driven by the fact that data in general, doesn't have a lot of value, but your dealership's proprietary data is incredibly valuable. So why would you just want to give that up to every vendor that you want to do business with? Doesn't make a lot of sense. Giving them access to your data is one thing, but you want to control that. So I had written something else also in this. I said the value of knowledge is going to go to zero, because knowledge is going to be so commonly available for all of us. Like, think about this. When I was a kid, dude, we went to the library and you had to know how to use the Dewey Decimal System. If I asked my kid what the Dewey Decimal System is, he would be like, what are you talking about, Dad? I just Google it. Though I will say this, you'll appreciate this, Sean. As a parent who has a 15-year-old, I told my son, he was doing research around the Holocaust, and he had to have a first-party perspective from a woman and a child who had lived through it. So he's trying to do the research in the school's data tool, and he was there for like an hour. And I'm watching him, and I'm like, do I help him? Do I not help him? And I'm like, what are you doing? So he tells me, hey, I need to have these first-party accounts. So I was like, huh. But he's like, it has to be cited. So it's very important, that it's like real research. I was like, okay. So I open up I walk with him to have lunch. I open up Perplexity, and I'm like, what are we trying to do? I was like, type in what you're doing. It literally brings back everything in 15 seconds, cited everything. He's like, I was like, finally. I was like, the Dewey Decimal System, like, old man has scored the most modern using perplexity to gain and access. So I feel the knowledge curve, though, goes to zero. But I feel the value of proprietary knowledge or experience is going to be at an extreme premium. So when you think about that, all the general knowledge around auto, not easy to get your hands on, not a lot of value. The true value will be your dealership or group's organizational knowledge, bringing that all in together into a system that is accessible to all employees and becomes your AI brain. And this is that point where I feel like you don't want a middleman in there. Like, this is the heart and soul of the future of your business, and and the only way you're going to get there is by controlling your data, and not only just owning your data, then owning ultimately the connections that your data has to everything.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I love that you highlight the fact that there's nuance that's really really important from like the dealer's data side that um, and the example you give with your son also is really brilliant. They I have just recently had a conversation with a company that has brought in somebody to consult something for them that's really, really important. And they could get foundationally in 15 seconds a whole kind of lay of the land of like, this is the automotive industry, because they don't know anything about it. But what they can't get is the other pieces of context from that nuance that comes specifically from this client that it's almost like paying to educate somebody about.
Yeah.
But all of these things I think are really important for dealers to think about how important their side is, and you highlight the fact that moving slowly, and when dealers are paying for people to be in the middle like this, it oftentimes is accessing their own data in the first place. So that ownership piece, which you're a big champion of, I think is also one of the things that can't be emphasized enough. And there's also risks when you're renting, and you mentioned this in your article, where the risk between renting versus owning can get really consequential for dealers. And you've been vocal about those changes. Why, in for your opinion, for at least for the podcast episode, why do you believe that's such a big risk?
Well, look, it's almost like it would be like a Formula One team. You're the team, you're the driver, but you don't own your car. Like, so you rent a car. Like, would that make sense? No? I wouldn't see a world where you rent the car. Like, you want to own the vehicle, because that vehicle, there's tons of proprietary software in it. There's tons of information. And so dealership to me is the same thing. The dealership has a enormous amount of intellectual capital and assets that are vastly underutilized. And that to me is number one when you think about it. And look, I'll tell you what drove me to this, which was actually really scary research. So we spend on average in any business, so car dealer, doesn't matter, it's going to be the same, 13% of our time looking for information. Okay, so 13% of your time at work, you know what that equals? 33 days a year. Wait, gets worse.
Wow.
We spend 37% of our time in meetings.
Ugh.
Okay, so that's 50% of our time is spent on non-revenue activities. The world we're living in, and to me, again, if I can get all that knowledge in, and now I can make it easily accessible organizationally, you change the game. And like, you're not spending 13% of your time looking for stuff. You don't need the meetings. Like, you just change your organizational trajectory by kind of rethinking how you're doing it. And and this is where it gets like hard, right? Because we're using frameworks that are very outdated today. We've evolved past our current frames and we're still using them. Like, oh, got to have a meeting about deciding like what SaaS vendors we're going to use and what marketing we're going to do this month, right? How many dealerships right now, it's 20th, are having emergency meetings because their numbers are off? So what can we adjust in our marketing right now? We need to crush our RO count is down for the month. Our used car sales are bad and we have too much overaged inventory. Like they're having I'm telling you, in stores all across the nation right now, as we're doing this podcast at 12:39 in the afternoon, I guarantee there are tons of meetings going on. And to me, that only thing I hear is you are not data driven. Because you're just, you're making these interesting kind of like, and that's the whole point. I was like, God, how do we get rid of that? How do we re-inspire building something that, look, and with AI can analyze all your ads, can analyze all your competitors' ads. You can upload into it all your brand guidelines, governance, right? What has worked, what hasn't worked, and now say, hey, we're off. What should we be doing? Like, you should be able to get answers quickly, insights, right? That's the power of this. Like, how do you bring all your data together that you own and now start to extrapolate insights against that data? That's the world. And if a dealer, and you're not any business, you're not focused on that, you are using the wrong framework in how you're running the business. And look, this is the hard part. You have to crash. I call it like crashing the sacred cows of, hey, that's how we've done business. This works. And you're like, I understand it works, but is it optimized?
That's a great question. It's a really good question.
So
And when
it's
you
a really
when you
hard
think
question to ask and answer.
it is. And when I love that you use the examples on, well, they're not even examples. When you give the facts of how much time is spent researching, how much time we spend in meetings, as depressing as that data is, it is exacerbated for dealers that are renting their data versus owning their data, right? The conversations they should be having from owning their data.
Listen,
the fact
when
that
you
they
rent your
don't is
data,
absolutely, yeah.
right. When you rent your data, this is what happens. You, someone comes in, extracts data from you. Okay. You've signed up with a SaaS tool. They go off and do whatever with that data. And now they give you back a report, right? This was success. Do you think any vendor is going to show bad data for the month?
Why
You
wouldn't
really
they?
you've lost control and insight into your business and you don't even know it. Because look, I get like a good partner is going to hopefully be candid with the information, hopefully. But why do you even want to put them in that seat? Why wouldn't you be the controlling? Like, yeah, I'm going to use your tool for the output, but you're going to give me back inputs. And then in my system, I can see the entire loop. And I think that's what dealers have to get to. And technologically, there's the capability to do that today, where you're not reliant on renting systems.
I think that's where the light's going to come on in the dark rooms for a lot of dealers, is when they realize, oh, I don't need them for this anymore. And I shouldn't have had to need them in the past, but now it's never been easier and faster for me to get what I want without doing what you're just describing. So, so we know that this data ownership is transformative for dealers in their entire operations. It also has benefit into the customer experience, which is something that gets talked about and should be talked about. Question for you would be, what's a realistic upside for dealers that end up with control of their data? Something that just they would be like, oh, okay.
Upside. Let's think. Better decision making. Because right now, if you're not getting the accurate data back from vendors, or like all the data back, you're getting a curated view. You're getting a biased view. How can you make decisions on incomplete data? So to me, first part is transparency in the data gives you better data-driven insights, not bias-driven insights. So that's first thing I think is important. Two, by owning and controlling the data, you will always have reliance on partners to do applications for us. But if you swap a partner out, which happens for whatever reason, new technology, disagreement, price increase, whatever it is, you as the business owner shouldn't have to be starting back at scratch. You should just be unplugging a component, plug a new component in. Think more like Legos. And the problem is with dealers today, and I view this like, I talk to groups all the time, and they're like, I talked to a group Monday. I was with them. They're like, we have a big data lake. And I'm like, they're like, we have 70 million people or something in the data lake. I don't know, some giant number. I'm like, it's like way too many people. All I heard, like, listening to that was, your data is crap. Your data is crap. It was like coming into me because I'm like, no way. Based on the number of stores they have, and I know about how many customers per store is realistic because we have groups on, so I get a good sense. I'm like, none of that math was going for me. But that being said, I look at that and I found all the data lakes we've seen. It's like, remember your kids had, you are a big Lego guy, right?
Love Legos.
I know you are a super Lego dude, or were a super Lego dude. I think you built a Star Wars Lego once, if I remember right. So when I think about Legos, and like you have the box with all the pieces in it, and it's like a disaster box, right? And you're like, dude, you're in there. Okay, that's a data lake. So yeah, all that data goes in there, but it's not valuable because it's just like a mess. Like if you broke apart the Falcon like cruiser and then some other Jedi set, and you threw it all in a box, do you really think you'd easily be able to reassemble them? Not a chance in this planet that it would take you. You would have to separate them all first and go like all these.
I'd rather play with broken glass.
Right. Okay. So you don't want a data lake is not going to solve a dealer's data problem. Like you want like a data lake house. You want, yeah, of course you want to be able to take everything in, but you then have to put it into things like all the windows go in this box, the tires and wheels go in this box, the figurines go in this box, the blue ones that are long go in here. You want to separate things and organize the data. And unless you do that, dude, having a data lake is an absolute, you know what it is? It is a thin micro blanket on a minus 20-degree night. You think it's covering your butt, but you're going to freeze to death anyway. That is how I look at when I see data lakes. We just call them data swamps. We've never tread into one where we weren't like, oh, God. Wow, they throw everything in here, but none of it's tagged right. There's not a lot of use for it. And you'll spend more time trying to extrapolate that than having a lake house, which is more like a data warehouse where, everything has a shelf and organization and tagged and much easier to manage from. But
yeah,
it's crazy.
You're touching on something relative to limitations or downsides with middleware, right? A lot of dealers still rely on these middleware solutions. And so love to know maybe some of your additional thoughts on the kind of problems that middleware creates. I mean, I think
Yep.
there's some obvious ones, but I think dealers probably could stand to hear some of these things that maybe don't initially come to mind for them.
Yeah, look, the first thing I always say is like data schema, right? Like, so I call it ID underscore customer. You call it customer underscore ID. Problem. Next guy just calls it customer. like, like, so first off, you have a sea of vendors. Everyone's data is structured differently. Nightmare. How do you deal with that? So
Yeah.
this is why the dealer, you want a organized schema, let your vendors access it and return back to your schema, not all theirs. Because managing 30 vendors and all their disparate schemas in middleware is impossible. So even with AI, and like, listen, we spend a crap ton of time, Sean, even just normalizing the chaos that comes out of like even DMS systems. Case in point.
Mm-hmm.
So having fun, we rip through cars. So, oh, here's all the cars. Then we'll see something like stocked in as CT. I'm like, CT? Shorthand for Chevrolet truck, or HO, Honda. Because that person who sat in that thing, who onboarded that car, new stock, right? They shorthanded it. The other person who does it doesn't shorthand it. So this is bad data in, bad data out. So we've had to build multiple like ML programs looking for what we call anomalies in data, just to clean up bad. Now, you could have just thrown them away and you'd be throwing away cars because it doesn't fit in the box. So not only do you have boxes that everything has to fit in, then you have to write programs that says, I think what you're trying to say, Sean, is that is Chevrolet truck, or we'll see stock number in instead of a make. We'll see someone boofed the VIN, and this is all human error. And same with customer files. Like, see tons of data issues there. Like in some systems, you'll have to have like a email address, so it'll just be na@na.com.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's trying to bypass like a screen. So where we put where some of these systems have restrictors in. So you got to normalize all of that, and you have to calculate think about just super complex things where and this is why middleware will never work, because you have to do this deep data work to ultimately advantage AI. Family of 4, husband, wife, daughter drives now, son is 15. So there's 3 cars now in the family, but the daughter brings the dad's car in, or the dad brings the daughter's car in, and you have just a cross of how you have to understand that. No, this car is this person's. I understand this person bid it, but this person's related to this person because we see him in a household. So you have to have that complete understanding. And this is the world we live in right now. And I think it's so critical, this fundamental deep data work. And this is what dealers need to be focused on. Because again, I think we talked about it in a previous episode. If you really want to take advantage of this future hockey stick of AI innovation, it'll all begin with clean and organized data in your system. And many, I will say zero groups that we have seen, talked to, or are currently doing business with had or have organized data? Zero. So they're
Yeah.
going to have very limited results with AI in the future unless they get their data right first.
And they can't do that with the middleware. So
Yeah.
the next thing I want to ask you is, if a dealership, actually it should be when a dealership wants to move away from middleware and fully own their data,
Yep.
what would you recommend or say is the first step?
Look, the first step, you got to figure out what you're going to do. So you need to create an architecture of, okay, we are going to go and look. Groups have taken that first, I will say, quick step to say, get it all in a data lake, right? Is that the best first step? I'll say it's a good first step. Probably not the best, but it's a good one. Probably like, oh yeah, we got to own our data. We got to get it all in one spot. Totally on board with that. So I think it's one, understanding where all your data lives. So first goal is mapping your data infrastructure. So the systems you're using, the data that's in them, the data that's available to be pulled out of them, and understand the correlation of how these systems are interacting with each other. You will find very common
Like
that
an
you're
audit.
yeah, like I won't say yeah, okay, like an audit of all your current technology, how it connects and talks to all the other technology, including how data moves, what's available, what's not, all the way down to even inventory. You may find you're spending and you have fees being charged to you on services you canceled a year ago, but nobody ever turned off the data
or,
pipes in the back because nobody
or
sees them.
redundant vendors. Yeah.
Tons. We see this like, oh my gosh, we go through and they're like, what? I was like, dude, you're spending $6,000 for this stuff. You don't. I've yet to find anyone organizationally use it. So we're like, I feel like we enter groups, we're like rats chasing the data like through a maze. Like we're looking, and I know there's cheese at the end. So I'm like, I know we're gonna trace this, and we'll say, oh, show me what system you use. Oh, we use this system, and then okay, then what happens? And then you're like, wow, then it just kind of stops here. Maybe it turns into a report or something. And I'm like, okay. But it's very interesting when you start peeling it back. And I take this lesson, and I've been rooted in this lesson because of interactions with groups and the conversation of like just fix our data. And I was like, that's not that easy. That's like Elon when he went to Russia and just tried to buy a rocket, right? And the Russians were like, ho ho ho, you little internet kid from America, we're not going to sell you a rocket. Or they're like, we want 40 million US dollars. And
It's a
they
good accent.
basically laughed Elon out of the thing. They're like, you're not NASA, you're not a government, because like who else would want a rocket but a government, right? And he's like, no, I want a
Right.
rocket. So not many people know the story, but like he flew home that night with the two guys he had hired, and the two guys in the back were like, well, honestly, that was a shit show. On the plane, Elon sat on his computer. By the time he landed, he had already figured out what it actually cost and the raw materials to build a rocket, and who he needed to now go talk to do it himself. It's crazy. But sometimes you have to peel things back to like, what is actually going on? We use this system. Why do you use this system? We've always used the system, Todd. I understand that, but why do you use it? What is it actually doing for you? I don't know. I plug it in here, but I totally get that. You plug it in there, but where does it go? I don't know. Okay. Like I hit so many maze like walls that I'm like, what is going on? Tons of redundancy and tons of data not moving between systems. So it's keyed in by different people, same data. So then it's different data because they keyed it in differently. Like they represented the same, like say, data element differently. And you see this constantly. And these are the things where it's like, okay, if you want your organization, your dealership group to run efficiently, if you think about it, it's going to begin by good quality data. And let's be honest. Look, you know a lot of dealers too. Like, could we call, if we sat on our core conversations right now, our podcast, and we call dealers, and we ask them one question, and they have to give us an honest answer. Do you feel your data is clean? What do you think our outcome would be?
Whether they'd be honest or what the truth could tell us.
Would one dealer or group say, yeah, we have really clean data? Okay, so beginning, they're operating inefficient. But dealerships are so profitable, nobody cares. But they're going to care this year. Why? Because margins are getting whacked. We have this whole tariff thing. It's going to affect new cars. We already have used car problems. Service, again, is like this last line of defense. But service is, a lot of times not efficiently operated. You have bleed out to third-party services, right? So we're only entering an exponential time of more and more competitiveness. Like, you probably need to get your data right first. And the other side is, you're also today, if you think about it, if you know you have bad data, and it does track, and I'm gonna put this. So Cox did a study. 70-some% of dealers said they don't trust their own data. Think about that from a business. 70, I think 78%. Don't quote me on that, but it was in a research paper. They don't trust their own data. So now think about that. So you have data you don't trust. You are making $1 million decisions against monthly.
Unbelievable.
Well, okay. So now you're in an airplane. I don't believe my altitude gauge. I don't believe my horizon line. I don't believe my airspeed. And we have just, I am totally IVR, like, at that point. And when you start looking at it and you're like, man, like, this has to change, because we're entering an accelerated time of competitiveness. It's only going to get worse. And to me, efficiency is where it's all going to land. So how you get efficient? Well, you better understand your data, and your data better be accurate, and your data better be able to stand on its own. So I think, and again, it's hard, dirty work, but it's so valuable when you get the data right. And then, we have groups that now they hook their BI, Power BI or Tableau or whatever to real good, accurate data. That's invaluable in and of itself to get your data organized, enhanced, more intelligence on it. I put the accoutrements on their data, right? Like, added additional insights, then start pairing it like, okay, do people even own those cars? So 40%, I would say, of the cars in most DMSs, people don't even own them, of the customer database. So that data is raw extracted by a direct mail or agency, who is then now think of the money. Cost money to extract. Now I build creative, cost money to do creative. And now I send it to that audience that's an inaccurate audience to begin with. If you don't have the data right, everything downstream breaks, or I won't say breaks, operates at an insane level of inefficiency. Just like software in dealerships, because think about it. You were at Reynolds. When you got a new store keyed up and operational, dude, they used the crap out of it. They're probably at 85, 90% of efficiency using all the systems. You go back in 3 months, they're at 50% because turnover, new guys train poorly, tribal knowledge is leaving the building. You go back in a year, it's 30%.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Because of this is why I also think not only do you need to clean your data, you need to capture the intelligence of your organization. And if you fail to do this in this coming wave of AI applications, you won't be left in the dust. You'll never get out of the gate. Like, there are going to be stores and groups that go AI first, and they will win. And they'll win at a rate that I don't think, like I think we talked about this before. I look at it like a flow of a river. I say that, like, if you enter the race and you start learning, and now your competitor enters the race 3 months from now, they start learning, they don't catch you. Now, in SaaS, you could catch up to people. In AI, you don't catch up to people, because AI is not a SaaS tool. It's not a product. It is a living, breathing species that learns, adjusts, and improves through time and experience. Like, look at Google Car. Google Car, from the beginning, Waymo was not very good. Look at it now. You go to Scottsdale, dude, you hop in Waymo, pretty much, drives without issues. But it didn't start there. And think of all the data input and all the simulated roads it rode. Like, I put a thing that I thought was interesting. Think about auto. So a dealer, I will tell you, this future I see as clear as day. Dealer organizes their data. Everything's clean and operational. Data, all the organizational's knowledge is uploaded. So everything from like brand and tone, key value props, usage and best practices, unique selling props, do's and don't guidelines for governance, FAQs, sample Q&A, content templates and examples for the brand, for everything, lexicon, terminology, summary, like all this is loaded into the brain, right? Once that happens, you basically say, create synthetic audiences based on my audiences. Now test the ads against in real time. And before you ever run an ad, you'll know how it'll perform by cohort. You'll be like, the eco-conscious person, this ad will resonate. The wealthy person on passive income, this will resonate. That is coming, like right now, using synthetic digital twins. So you won't spend the money to market until you know it's pretty much been validated.
Yeah, it's so once again, you've just absolutely dropped knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb on data ownership, kind of what's here, how the future is. I love when you share so many of these examples that for a dealer that is listening to you or reading the content that you put in, especially to LinkedIn, when you share things like, hey, if you don't own this stuff, you have no control over what's happening in the future. If you don't get this, in line and prioritized today, everyone that does it before you will truly have a competitive advantage. Like, you're cutting through some things that have been cliche, almost platitudes in our industry for so long that aren't necessarily true, with statements that are absolutely true, backed up by evidence of what's really happening. And it challenges a lot of the people that talk about data lakes and CDPs and all this other kind of happy horse shit that they use really for their own monetary gain, right? Because it shifts the industry thinking, that you're cutting through things that the dealers really need to know, regardless of how they decide to act on the facts and on the information. They need to know it. And I love that you come from that perspective of they educate, but yet, as I say all the time, you got to start somewhere, and there's a difference between knowing and doing, but you at least need people to know. And so as we close out this, once again, another freaking great conversation, super good episode. I want to encourage the audience, make sure you go back and check out this full article. We couldn't even get into all of it just on talking about some of this on the episode. The article that Todd put out on this is even more informative. It's a great companion to this conversation, or the document to the conversation to the document, that I highly recommend. If your dealership wants to stay competitive, maybe you're not that competitive right now. If you want to get competitive, you want to cut costs, we talk about future proofing your operation. Good grief, you need to get on this horse right now and start kicking up some dust. You got to take control first and foremost with your data. You got to own it. You got to get involved with that. Todd doesn't say this stuff to hear the sound of his own voice. So I'll say it for him. The best place to connect with Todd is on LinkedIn. He is absolutely abundant with his time. So if you want to DM him there, he talks about a lot of things that right now dealers are not necessarily comfortable dropping comments into the posts that he puts out there. So feel very, very confident that you can actually send him a direct message on LinkedIn, and he will actually respond to you. If you want to have a private conversation with him, that's the best place to connect with him. If you also want to connect with him through email because you're really, really old, well, then you can do that at Todd. And he doesn't spell it like any crazy person. It's TODD at QoreAI.com. And that's QoreAI.com. Todd at QoreAI.com, or just hit him up on LinkedIn. That's a wrap for the episode today, folks. Thank you, as always, for listening and or watching. If you found the conversation valuable, subscribe if you're out on YouTube, any other places. Share it with people that need to know about this. They need to hear this message. It's the reason why Todd makes this kind of content. We will, of course, be back with more insights on how you can stay ahead in automotive retail, specifically around owning your data and using AI to transform your future. Until then, go free your data, dealers. Go. Let it be free. Thanks again for an awesome episode, Todd.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Always great to be here.